In the DC universe, there are a lot of villains. However, hardly anyone comes remotely close to the heinous crimes that Darkseid has committed over the years. If there was an award for the most villainiest villain to ever villain in the DC universe, Darkseid would win the award with zero competition. Joker's unhinged actions and Lex Luthor's obsession have nothing on the sheer menace that Darkseid is. So in today's video, we decided to handpick the 15 most abhorrent actions of Darkseid and explain why he is the cruelest of them all. So strap in, cause it's about to get gruesome. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Tortured Wonder Woman and killed many Amazonians. Darkseid is a beast. He's hungry for power, and if he can't get it in proper civilized ways, when does he ever, he snatches it. It doesn't matter to him if he's going against humans or gods. I mean, he killed the old gods in his world to become the monster that he is today, so it would be a bit stupid to think that any other god would scare him. In the DC universe, when you think of the word god, you have to think about the Greek pantheon. With how closely tied Greek mythology is wound with Wonder Woman and her wondrous escapades, it would be silly not to give them the spot they deserve. This is how the Olympians ended up on Darkseid's hit list. As he is constantly seeking more and more power, Darkseid thinks that he can go and get the powers of the Olympians himself. However, the Olympians are not out there dropping their location for anyone to access. So he decided that the best way to go about it would be to capture Wonder Woman herself. In the 104th issue of Wonder Woman, we find Diana in Darkseid's unforgiving clutches. He wants her to tell him where the Pantheon is and how he can get there. But Diana is no snitch. She'd rather die than give Darkseid the details he so badly desires. So, to pry the information out of her, Darkseid sent his troops to Themyscira, Wonder Woman's homeland. While it's true that the ladies of Themyscira are a tough nut to break, I mean, they're all capable fighters, but when facing such a devastating power like Darkseid's, it would take a lot more to hold their ground. With one simple command, Darkseid effectively wiped out half of their numbers and made it look easy. He committed genocide just like that, which is apparently a daily thing for him. Well, he is Darkseid after all. It sorta is a daily thing for him because this was not the only genocide he caused. Yikes. The Unthinkable happens to Batman. The Dark Knight of Gotham is a hero through and through. He took it upon himself to go through the hardships and keep the people around him safe, even if it meant putting his life on the line repeatedly. Even as a hero, he had a code of conduct, a rule that set him apart from other mindless killers. We all know which one I'm talking about. Batman never uses a gun. He's willing to throw hands, and he sure does that really nicely, but bringing a gun to a fist fight is not something Batman does. Mostly, it just goes the other way around for him, except one time. In the Final Crisis era, every hero on Earth knew that they had to go all out to stop Darkseid. The villain had gained so much power that it was almost impossible to stop him. Not even Superman, the Man of Steel, would be able to stop the villain and his rampage. This pushed heroes to make a lot of choices, and Batman himself decided to break his code of honor and bring a gun with a radium bullet, which had taken the life of Orion. However, what nobody was expecting was for Darkseid to not only survive the bullet, but also incinerate Batman with his Omega beams. One of the greatest heroes of Earth fell that day, and that was a wake-up call for every surviving hero. Darkseid was willing to go to any limits just to prove his point. Now, we, as fans, know that Batman didn't actually die. He was sent back in time to the prehistoric era of Earth's past. But that doesn't change the fact that Darkseid was cruel enough to kill him to send a message to the heroes. Darkseid uses his victim's soul. Darkseid is the proud user of the Omega effect. It's an energy that allows him to use powerful bioelectric energy beams to defeat his opponents. These beams are strong enough to destroy the planets that stand in his way, hurt Kryptonians, and whatever other devastating actions you can think of. But here's the thing, this is not the only thing that the Omega effect can do. As we see in the 3rd issue of Superman Doomsday Hunter Prey, his Omega effect allows him to trap people's souls in a marble. If you followed the story arc leading up to this point, you'd know that there was a cyborg Superman who was basically running amok all over Apokolips, and he fused himself with the Apocalyptian tech, which is very bad news for everyone standing in Cyborg Superman's way. To stop this villain, Superman and Darkseid joined forces. During the encounter, it seemed like Darkseid actually killed Cyborg Superman, or at least that's what Superman knew. But in reality, Darkseid trapped the villain's soul as an insurance so that the moment everything turns against him, Darkseid could reach into his pocket and bring out his secret card, a Kryptonian beating threat to ensure he succeeds. While Jeremy Clarkson's genius didn't frighten anyone but himself, Darkseid's genius definitely did. Seeds of evil, twisting innocence of a child into a monster. History has proven to us time and time again that it is not the middle-aged people who change the world, it's the youth. So if Darkseid wanted to rule everything and have his corrupt ways become the norm, the best way to go about it would be by corrupting the youth. That shouldn't come as a surprise at all. But the things this villain has done have me absolutely astounded. Did you know that he told a young boy to kill his own cat because apparently the cat killed his bird? I mean, that is an unfortunate event, yes, but killing the cat for that is far more harsh than it needs to be. This young boy, this child, he didn't know any better. So when Darkseid told him to kill his cat, he took his little furball to the garden and buried it alive. But wait, this is not the messed up part. The real morbid twist is that the bird was never dead to begin with. The bird found the cage door unlocked and went out for a flight. So when the bird returned, imagine the horror, the pain, and the anger this young child must have felt. Well, the emotions that he felt were so overpowering that his mind broke, and the child killed the bird with his own two hands. Jesus, talk about a dark playtime. But that's not all. This was a story that Darkseid told Eclipso rather fondly, like it was a great memory. Holy moly, dude, are you alright? Obviously he's not, because again, he's Darkseid. Of course, the evil god finds this whole thing mildly entertaining, but we as readers are shocked to our cores. And if you're curious about the young boy, well, he's Darkseid's cruelest minion, who we all know as Dissect. Talk about a challenging recruitment. Big Barta and Superman's adult movie. In the 592nd issue of Action Comics, we saw the introduction of one of the wildest characters ever. I know it's a bit weird that I'm talking about someone else in a video about Darkseid, but let me explain. I'm talking about Sleaze. As you can guess from the name, this character is not the most morally upright, nice guy. This villain is a giant sleazeball, and his powers help him live out his perverse fantasies. How? Because his powers are controlling people's minds. The story starts off with Big Barta, the great warrior who used to be a part of Darkseid's posse but left. She's in a bit of a situation. You see, she currently lives on Earth, specifically in Metropolis, where another superhero resides, and things are not easy for her. Like, she accidentally stumbled onto the suicide slums, the worst part of the city, where she got pickpocketed. The man escaped with her purse, and since her mega rod, her weapon, was inside the bag, Big Barta gave chase. This surprised the man, and he decided to go into the sewers, hoping it would shake her off his trail. But nope, Barta is not scared a bit of dirty water, so she followed him into the sewers, where she was unceremoniously attacked by someone who knew how to use the mega rod. It was Sleaze. He was also a part of Darkseid's posse in Apokolips, and he was banished to Earth, and to make this everyone's problem, he decided to control Barta with his abilities for his pleasure. Now, when you have such a beautiful woman in your control, what do? Well, according to Sleaze, you make her dance in what looks like bandages. While he was messing around with his powers and basically abusing Barta, Superman showed up to save the day. He tracked Sleaze down and freed Barta from his spells. Now free from the control, Barta attacked Sleaze, wanting to kill him, but when Superman stopped her, she assumed he was under Sleaze's control and attacked Supes instead. This gave Sleaze enough time to knock both of them out. Mr. Miracle, Barta's longtime lover, came home to find none other than Darkseid, yes, the man, the myth, the legend himself, on their couch with a tape. While we are not shown the contents of the video, from the context and Mr. Miracle's reactions, it becomes very clear that it's an adult film with Barta as the main actress. Darkseid knew about Sleaze's sleazy affairs, and instead of stopping him and getting his hands dirty, he let Barta bear the brunt of the blow and forced forced Mr. Miracle to fight with this sleazeball instead. When Mr. Miracle showed up at Sleaze's movie studio, he found Barta and Superman entangled in a rather compromising situation. But thankfully, he was able to stop them before clothes started flying. While my heart cries for Mr. Miracle, can we just take a moment and talk about how ice-cold Darkseid is? He hand-delivered a sex tape, knowing very well this might break apart a couple just because he wanted someone else to take care of the problem. Corrupted Supergirl and made her a villain. In the Superman-Batman movie, when Supergirl crash-landed on Earth and is rescued by Batman, she ends up catching the eyes of Darkseid, but not in a good way. See, in the movie, Kara struggles with her newfound powers after being rescued, where Wonder Woman and the Amazonians teach her the way of life, which is excellent, but Supergirl just does not have the control over her own life that she wants. Darkseid sent Granny Goodness after her and kidnapped her from Themyscira. She was brainwashed and turned into Darkseid's thrall. Darkseid taught her how to use the Mother Box, and the destruction Kara caused in her brainwashed state was a sight to behold for him. Superman eventually rescues her, and she debuts as the heroine we love so much, but the amount of torture Darkseid puts her through is just not done. Not even his daughter is safe. Darkseid has constantly attacked other heroes. He's used unsuspecting people and turned them into his pawns, and he has wreaked havoc wherever he wants. One would think that he would not do the same with his own blood, right? Nope, even his own blood was not safe from his evil schemes. For those who don't know, Darkseid had a daughter with an Amazonian whom we know as Grail. Now, Grail was supposed to grow up with her mother. She was supposed to have an honorable life. However, Darkseid used to show up in her nightmares and give her visions of wickedness, informing her that she was his. He corrupted his daughter over time, and eventually, this led to her switching sides. Grail was the cause of devastation on Earth when she started a war between Darkseid and Anti-Monitor. While we can cut her some slack because she was never an evil person to begin with, we can't do the same for her father in good conscience. Corrupting your own daughter to make her a diabolical villainess, even though she could have brought so much goodness with her and helped so many people, is an abhorrent act of cruelty. Brainwashing billions, Darkseid's most diabolical scheme. It's no secret that Darkseid has done a lot of horrible acts over the years, but somehow his most significant act of cruelty happened after he was dead. Bro really said, "You can kill me, but you cannot stop the powers of evil." After Orion killed his father, Darkseid's spirit mingled with the spirits of the new gods. Together, these spirits fell down on Earth and took over new human bodies to carry out their propaganda. So even if the heroes were rejoicing in the death of Darkseid, the villain was never truly dead. In the final crisis, the brutal crime lord, Darkseid, turned out to be none other than Darkseid himself. He used the anti-life equation, something that he had been wanting to do for a long time. He spread it through communication devices all around the world like a virus, and everyone, humans and heroes alike, who got in contact with the virus became his pawns. There was no free will on Earth. Only Darkseid's will reigned supreme. Billions of people turned into the forces of evil that would move at every command thrown their way by this tyrant. And Darkseid was, of course, happy. His goal of controlling Earth was finally achieved. Thankfully, right before he controlled the entire universe with its anti-life equation, the Justice League and the heroes who weren't under his control managed to defeat Darkseid. Talk about a well-timed save. Family Feud turns fatal. He killed his family member. When you're one of the greatest villains in a particular comic universe, killing people is child's play. Murdering one person really doesn't impact your character as a cruel villain when you've committed mass genocides like Darkseid has. However, this particular murder is worthy of attention. Originally, Darkseid was a farmer who realized that the gods in his world did not care about the people. So the gods had no right to live longer than the people themselves. This led to him taking the violent path of killing old gods and ushering in a new era with himself. This origin paints Darkseid in an understanding light. I may not support his atrocious activities, but I can understand the motivations behind them. John Byrne decided to revamp the original story, and what we got was an unforgiving take on Darkseid's personality. In the 4th issue of Jack Kirby's Fourth World, we see a new origin of Darkseid. Here, Uxas, Darkseid's original name for those who don't know, is a prince who is second in line. His brother Drax was a good man who wanted to learn about the Omega Effect and use it to help the people of his kingdom, and eventually the world. But Uxas said, Not on my watch. He killed his brother in cold blood to get his grimy hands on the Omega Effect and take the throne of Apocalypse for himself. But this was not the only instance of Darkseid killing his family member. While the whole Drax situation I explained takes place in the New Earth timeline, Darkseid also killed people close to him in the Prime Earth timeline. In this timeline, Darkseid was the son of Yuga Khan and Hegra. After Darkseid killed off the old gods, we'll talk about this a bit later, Yuga Khan wanted to reanimate them. He knew that if he did reanimate the old gods, the new gods would cease to exist. Right when he was about to kill Isaiah, his firstborn son, Yuxas, his secondborn, did him in. After his father died, Yuxas took on the role of bearer of the Omega Effect. Hegra, who was researching DNA at the time, trying to figure out the best way to create new gods and keep the bloodline strong, was now the ruler. However, when she replaced Sully, Darkseid's first love, with her personal choice, she signed her own death sentence. Knowing his mother was not supportive of his love pushed Darkseid to an extreme, and he sent Granny Goodness to kill his mother. When Hegra was about to be killed, she handed over her book of bloodlines, which had all the information she knew about the DNA of new gods, to Granny Goodness, urging her to use the knowledge later. So we can reasonably conclude that Darkseid's cold-blooded nature remained a constant even if the timelines were different and his origin story was revamped. Darkseid turns super friends into super pawns. One common theme in all of Darkseid's schemes has to be how much he craves power. Now, how do you achieve power when people have free will? You simply destroy that free will and take control of everyone. This is probably why Darkseid is so obsessed with the anti-life equation. But the anti-life equation is a massive attack. What would this tyrannical villain do when he wants to get his hands on magical artifacts, but he doesn't want to use his powers to their fullest ability, even if it's simply because the mission doesn't require it? Well, he uses his own mental powers, silly. In the 15th issue of Superpowers collection, we get a great example of that. Darkseid uses his powers to take over the minds of Superman and Martian Manhunter and sends the Super Friends to Dr. Fate's lair. Dr. Fate, the great sorcerer who fights the forces of evil, is no noob. He protected his house with a magical shield that would only allow friends to come through. Since Darkseid wanted his hands on the magical artifacts to be kept safe inside his house, he sent the mind-controlled Super Friends to take them out of the doctor's house. Dr. Fate allowed his friends in, thinking nothing was wrong. But when Supes attacked him and started taking his stuff, Dr. Fate realized things were entirely terribly wrong. Luckily, his divine powers helped him understand that Darkseid was behind everything, and he managed to save his friends. However, this doesn't take away from the fact that Darkseid's vast powers make him highly unpredictable as a villain. You can never be too sure about your own friends when Darkseid's in the picture. I mean, after all, who knows when he will take power over their free will? Instant takeover. Darkseid beams up a planet of new minions. The Omega Effect is a powerful energy. We've seen how it's a weapon of mass destruction in the hands of Darkseid. He can use it to teleport people, destroy planets, revive people, move people through time, and a lot more. But as it turns out, these are not the only things that his power can do. Sure, trapping people's souls is cool and all, but what can the Omega Effect do that can easily change the lives of billions of people? Well, that's what you can find out in the 293rd issue of Legion of Superheroes. In this issue, we learn that over time, Darkseid had gained enough power that allowed him to physically move a planet. Once he knew he had that power, no one could stop Darkseid from using it for his selfish reasons. He took the entire planet of Daxam and placed it under the light of the yellow sun. Daxam generally was under the light of the red sun. As you know, in the DC universe, if you go from red to yellow sunlight, you gain powers. Conversely, you lose those powers if you go back into the red sunlight. So pretty much all the billions of inhabitants living on planet Daxam transformed into supermen and superwomen thanks to the change in the solar system. Now, you might think, hey, that's not so bad. Now these people have powers to protect themselves. Well, it may seem like that on the surface, but the reality is far worse. You see, none of these people are actually able to make decisions on their own. All of their minds were under Darkseid's control. Only once he had the power over the people did he actually move the planet. So now, Darkseid had a whole planet full of supermen and superwomen mindlessly following his orders, which was enough to destroy any superhero standing between him and his goals. He used the Daxamites to wage intergalactic wars over several worlds. While the Legion did manage to put an end to this, the results of these wars were catastrophic. Millions of lives were lost, and several worlds were destroyed. Crushed Green Lantern's hands with his ring. The Green Lantern Corps, an intergalactic peacekeeping force that was reimagined in the Silver Age, is a force of goodness. This force has been around for a while, maybe even as long as Darkseid has existed. This begs the question, why did the Green Lanterns never stop Darkseid? I mean, it was no secret that Darkseid's a threat to not only mankind, but the entire galaxy. So why not nip it in the bud? Well, about that. In the third issue of Green Lantern's 80-page Giant, we get the whole story about Darkseid and the Lanterns. Roughly about 1,346.72 years ago, the Lanterns sent a Manhunter robot to Apokolips. The Manhunter went and interacted with the general public of Apokolips. At first, it seemed like the android was able to get through to the people who were under the assumption that no other world existed. However, the situation took a terrifying turn when the Manhunter explained that he was here as a guardian of the universe. The justice he brought with him was not at all welcomed by the Apocalyptians, and the result of the tussle was far grislier than you can imagine. The Manhunter was torn apart, bit by bit, by the lowlies. The bits and pieces were burned in the fire pits, while its lantern was brought to Darkseid. Now aware that the Guardians were after him, Darkseid destroyed the lantern with a swift crunch, implying that that was how he would crush the Guardians when they showed up. Orion, Darkseid's son, actually joined the Green Lantern Corps as a corpsman. During his time there, he told the Lanterns, specifically Kyle Rayner, his training partner, how one time a corpsman did manage to humble Darkseid. This was quite intriguing for Kyle, so Orion offered to bring Kyle to New Genesis so that he could hear the story from Metron himself. However, right when they were in the middle of transit, Dissect took over their boom tube and directed it to Apokolips instead. When they ended up on enemy territory, the two corpsmen had no idea what to do. Kyle and Orion decided that the first and main thing they needed to do was flee from Darkseid's soldiers. The second prerogative of their current situation should be to send a distress signal. Once they managed to hide themselves away from the soldiers, Kyle sent Orion's mother to send a message to the Justice League. As they waited for their friends to arrive, they came across someone who they thought was dead. It was Raker Karagath. He was a Green Lantern who was thought to be lost, but turns out he had been living here all this time. As they started talking, Raker was distraught to hear that the Guardians of the Universe were no longer active. But this grieving time was cut short when the soldiers of Darkseid managed to track them down. So Raker brought them to his secret hideout. This is where we, along with Kyle, learn how Raker ended up living in Apokolips for so long. Many years ago, when the Green Lantern Corps had only a few lanterns left, Raker was dispatched to Apokolips to go up against Darkseid. Raker fought his way through the lowlies and the soldiers to meet with the Dark Lord. But when they came face to face, Raker's threats and actions meant nothing to the great cosmic Big Bad. The Dark Lord felt like there was nothing inherently threatening about Raker or his Green Lantern powers. Just to prove his point, Darkseid grabbed Raker's hand and, with a few bloody crunches, effortlessly broke his ring and hand. Darkseid could have killed Raker, but he chose to send Raker back to Oa, using him as a messenger. His ring, however, ended up in the hands of Dissect. Raker did go back to Oa and told the Corps about the threat that Darkseid imposed on them. However, the Corps and the Guardians thought it was no big deal. Darkseid managed to win this fight because Raker was alone, so the Corps expanded itself, and about 3,600 lanterns were sent to deal with Darkseid. Dissect, who had been studying the broken ring, managed to figure out that the green power ring's weakness happened to be the yellow spectrum. So soon enough, Darkseid's entire army was covered in yellow coating, and as you can guess, the lanterns were decimated. The ones who were taken in as prisoners were tortured and killed. Their bodies were displayed as a warning to those who dared to oppose Darkseid. The lanterns, who were able to prevent being captured, desperately got hold of Apocalyptian weaponry, hoping to attack Darkseid with those, as they were no longer allowed to power their ring. rings. However, right before they could launch the attack, the Guardians of the Universe showed up. Much to Raker's horror and shock, the Guardians were not here to fight against Darkseid. Instead, they were here to make a truce. The Guardians realized that Apocalypse was so far away from the area that they governed that it would be better if Darkseid was left to his own devices. Talk about dirty politics. Darkseid was more than happy with this truce, but he asked Raker to be left behind as his prisoner of war for the rest of the time. The Guardians of the Universe accepted it and left Raker behind. The hideout where Kyle, Raker, and Orion were staying was soon discovered, and our heroes had to fight off the soldiers again. In the midst of the fight, the trio ended up in a parademon hatchery, which was terrible news for all of them. Kyle's power ring soon ran out of charge, and right when they were about to become parademon meals, Raker pulled out his ring. Turns out, his trainee had given his ring back to him in secret. When the Justice League showed up to help Kyle and Orion, they were forced to leave the lost Green Lantern behind, leaving Kyle to wonder how Raker managed to survive the Apocalyptian society. Well, all this time, Raker's own willpower to help the Hunger Dogs recharged the power ring. Even though Darkseid used his powers to cruelly destroy a man and take him as a prisoner of war for petty reasons, destroying every aspect of his life, one thing Darkseid never managed to take away from Raker was his willpower. This shows that even the cruelest of men have to bow to the willpower and a heart of gold, which honestly is a good enough take-home message. He killed all of his current and future concubines. As the ruler of Apocalypse, Darkseid is infamous for his evil tendencies. But how far is he willing to go to maintain this persona of his? The 40th issue of Countdown, released in 2007, gives us the best idea of that. In this issue, we see Darkseid looking somewhat distant, almost deep in thought. One of his concubines approached him and mentioned the emotions on his face. Darkseid admitted that he was thinking about his sons. This moment of tenderness makes Darkseid human in a second. This obviously shocked the concubine, and when Darkseid noticed it, he admitted that other people would find it shocking as well. So, to prevent this from becoming news, he immediately shot the concubine point blank, vaporizing her. He then ordered Darkseid to slit the throats of all of his future concubines to prevent the gossip about his weakness from being spread around. While this is an overall mild offense when you consider all the crimes he's committed, the actions of Darkseid simply prove that even knowing about his vulnerability results in the death penalty. So, if you have a death wish, you don't even have to go the extra mile by going against the man. Just get to know him, and boom, you're dead. Did Darkseid slay the old gods, or something else? A few minutes ago, while recounting his deeds with his family members, I talked about Darkseid's life as a farmer and how he managed to slay the old gods. Well, that could have made you wonder how a mere human managed to kill off literal gods, right? When it comes to Yuxas, he always found it stupid that people around him kept praying to the gods. He knew the gods didn't care about them, and when he figured out that they survived on prayers, he wondered why the gods should keep on living when the people were not shown the same mercy like that. So, one night, Yuxas climbed the mountain atop which the old gods lay. He went up to the sleeping gods and planted a seed of doubt in each of them in faint whispers. Doubt grows like vines that entangle themselves around the heart and never lets you go. And the gods, too, fell victim to that. The old gods fought and started taking each other out. These fights killed off people as well, so the prayers dwindled in numbers, leaving the gods weakened. Yuxas used that as an advantage and killed the gods one by one, taking their powers to become Darkseid. His plan destroyed both the people and the gods, and if that's not wicked, I don't know what is. Devouring the multiverse with ease. This villain has done a lot of things, but he's mostly known to be an absolute control freak. He just wants to be the one with unquestionable supreme power. However, in the 23rd issue of Constantine, we learn that he's destroyed the universe as well. Turns out Darkseid had eaten the entire universe without any problems. He's a godlike being who has a version of himself in every reality, and each version of himself draws power from the true source. All the versions we've seen fighting with the League are just his avatars, and his true form, which we have rarely seen, is many times more powerful, which almost crushed the multiverse under its weight. Marvelous verdict. When you consider all the crimes our godlike villain has committed, his evilness seems to have endlessly many facets. If control and pure evil had to be personified, Darkseid would be a sterling example. Looking at his infamous feats, we can easily understand that this guy poses perhaps the greatest threat to the DC Universe as a whole. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.